So earlier today, Dodge announced the next generation Dodge Charger, and a lot of people are furious. What is up, everybody? Shwazy here. Welcome back to the channel. Today's video, we're talking about a pretty big event, and that is the unveiling of the next generation Dodge Charger. We've been waiting for this day for quite a long time now. Dodge has been teasing the next generation Charger or Challenger. We didn't really know what it was going to be for almost like 2 years at this point, and today was the day. Now, in January of this year, they dropped a teaser photo of what it would look like, and so we kind of had an idea, but today, March 5th, at 11 a.m. Eastern time, we finally got to see the unveiling of the next generation Dodge Charger. And so in today's video, let's talk about it, because there are some things that were big surprises, and there were some things that we expected based on what they've been teasing over the last 2 years. So first things first, I want to talk about the looks. And personally, I really like the appearance of this thing. I liked it when they showed it off like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, when it was called the SRT Banshee concept, whatever. There was like a super long name for it. I really liked the way it looked back then, and then I saw it in person. I should say I saw the concept in person about a year ago at the Muscle Cars at the Strip back in March of 2023, where they did the big Demon 170 unveiling, and I really liked it there. It was in the nice red color, and the one I liked the least was probably the one they teased back in January of 2024, where they showed off kind of almost what looked like spy photos, even though they willingly showed us these photos, but it was kind of like this dark grayish color. It was also a cloudy, overcast day, so the photo just didn't really do it justice, and I didn't really like the way that one looked as much as the concept. But I gotta say, seeing this one that they unveiled today, I think it looks almost just as good as the concept car. I mean, it's almost as close to a concept as possible. Now, of course, it had to have door handles, and it has to have larger side view mirrors, but overall it stayed pretty true to the design of the original concept, which I really liked. Next thing I want to discuss is something that I didn't expect, I don't think a lot of people expected, is the fact that there's going to be a lot of different variants right out of the gate. So you're gonna have a two-door version, which is what we expected. That's kind of what we saw in the concept car and what we saw when they teased the photo last month. And now they've unveiled that there's also going to be a four-door version. And you know, if you look up both of them, you'll see that the design is almost identical. I imagine they've extended the length of the four-door version, but the design still looks really good. It looks very similar to the old 1960s Dodge Charger. It's kind of a modern interpretation of that. So I think two-door, four-door, you really can't go wrong. You have the same exact design for both of them. So that was the first surprise. The second one, which is kind of something we expected, every single model is going to come with all-wheel drive. So regardless of what powertrain you pick, that is the standard. And that's really good, because rear-wheel drive, although fun, in a car with this much horsepower, I'm driving in my Dodge Challenger Hellcat wide body today, there's just not enough tire in the planet to put the power down. And so to have all-wheel drive just out of the gate is awesome, not only for traction, but also for those of us that live in cold climates where it rains and snows. It's nice to have that all-wheel drive capability. So I'm really glad that you can have that on pretty much any single trim level. The next, somewhat of a surprise, although we've been hearing rumors over the last year, and we kind of expected it. I've even made videos about it in the past. That is the fact that there's going to be both an electric vehicle and an internal combustion engine. So they're coming out with the same exact design, aside from one little tweak to the front end, but you can get it in either an electric vehicle or a gas engine. And we'll talk about all the specs here in a second. So first off, let's kick off with the electric vehicle, because that's the one we kind of expected to come out. So starting off, they're coming out with two trim levels. Now, both of them come on the 400-volt architecture, which is very similar to a lot of Tesla products. Some of the newest EVs on the market, like the Kia EV6, the Lucid Air, those all ride on the 800-volt architecture. So that provides for faster charging. You can have smaller wires because there's less resistance in the current. I'm not an electrical engineer, so I'm not going to pretend like I can explain the details between 400-volt and 800-volt, but I will say that 400-volt is more common right now, but cars are transitioning into the future into 800-volt architectures. But the first two trim levels of the Charger will be a 400-volt system, and every single one of them comes with a 100.5 kilowatt-hour battery, which is, you know, similar in size to some of the Tesla products out there. So it's a decently sized battery. Now, the name for the electric version is going to be called the Dodge Charger Daytona, and I think that reason they do that is because the front end has that big hood scoop that kind of allows air to pass over the top of the vehicle, giving you better aerodynamics. And that's actually called the R-Wing. They've patent pended that name, but it looks really cool, just like the concept car. Now, in terms of powertrain, the first entry-level one is going to be called the RT. On the RT, you get about 496 horsepower, which is way more than the Hemi 5.7-liter V8 RT that would come on the prior generation Dodge Charger and Challengers. And 0 to 60, according to Dodge, is supposed to be 4.7 seconds. So out of the gate, the entry-level Dodge Charger is going to be more powerful than the entry-level Dodge Charger is as of 2023. Now, the next trim level they're coming out with from the very beginning is the one I'm more excited about, and that is the Scatpack. Yes, they're bringing back the name. It's coming back for this electric powertrain, and that one has some very impressive power figures. We're talking 670 horsepower and 627 pound-feet of torque. I mean, that is ridiculous power from a Scatpack, considering it used to be 485 horsepower and 475 pound-feet of torque. Now, Dodge says, believe it or not, given the fact that it's all-wheel drive, it may actually be able to achieve these numbers. Dodge says you can do 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. They say it's quicker 0 to 60 than any of the outgoing Hellcat models, which is true, because I think the quickest red-eye was like 3.4 or 3.5, and this is 3.3 out of a Scatpack. Now, the name doesn't really mean much because it's obviously not a replacement for the Scatpack. It's not an internal combustion engine, but it's still just really cool to see that you can get 3.3 0 to 60 out of pretty much the second trim level within their lineup. And this isn't going to be the most powerful one. There's actually going to be another one coming out, or introduced, I should say, next year, called the Banshee. And that one is going to be on the 800-volt architecture, which is, of course, going to allow for even more power. And that one is rumored to have over 800 plus horsepower, be more powerful than any of the outgoing Charger or Challengers. And that one will probably do 0 to 60 under 3 seconds and have maybe even over 1,000 horsepower. We don't really know the details on that, but the Scatpack is kind of the mid-trim level, and you're already beating all the Hellcats, Chargers, and Challengers that are coming out in 2023. Now, in terms of quarter mile, they say the Scatpack will do 11.5 seconds, which is very similar to Hellcat territory, but given the fact that this is all-wheel drive, you're probably going to be able to get there more consistently than you would in a Hellcat, where you constantly have to, burn out the tires and be at the right elevation and yada, yada, yada. This one's going to be, in my opinion, a lot easier to do because you have that instant torque and that traction on all four wheels. Now, in terms of range figures, Dodge was quick to note that this car isn't meant for long distance traveling or efficiency. It's really meant for power delivery, or at least that's what they're trying to sell to us. What they said was the Charger Daytona RT, which is that entry-level powertrain, that one's going to get upwards of 317 miles of range. Now, the Scatpack version, which is the more powerful one, is going to get around 260 miles of range, which really isn't that bad when you compare it to some of the other high-performance electric vehicles out there. Some of them are in the low 200s, and so if it can realistically get 260 to 300, that's about average. Now, in terms of charging, it's not super impressive. Peak charging rate is about 183 kilowatt hours, which is okay. Some of the best electric vehicles on the market today are hitting 250, 300, 350, and so at 183, you're just about average. So it's not going to be a super quick charging vehicle, but again, that's not the intent. And then if you plug in at home, it's pretty standard kilowatt charging at around 11 kilowatts per hour. So, about average in terms of its electric powertrain, but in its power delivery, it's up there as some of the best, at least among its competition, which there really isn't very many. Now, they did mention that there are some performance goodies that either come standard or you can upgrade on the Scatpack trim level. One of those is adaptive dampers. You've also got 325 millimeter wide tires in the back, which is impressive because, as you know, the wide body Hellcats are only at 305. So you got some fat tires back there. You can also get 6-piston, 16-inch Brembo front calipers on the Scatpack as well, which are massive sized, and they should provide some really good stopping power for the vehicle, which makes sense because the car weighs nearly 6,000 pounds. So they really haven't strayed away from being overweight vehicles. And, it kind of comes with the territory. Electric vehicles are not light. But given the fact that you have that battery located underneath you, you're going to have a pretty good low center of gravity. So you should have better handling than a lot of the, outgoing following Challenger Scatpacks and Hellcats. A couple other things to point out: every single Daytona Charger will come with that Fratzog symbol in the front. That's kind of a throwback to some of the 60s vehicles, and they use that emblem as well. So they've teased that earlier, but it does look pretty cool. It lights up, it's got that red color. And then every single Charger Daytona is gonna come with that Fratzonic exhaust. And what that is it's essentially like a pipe organ where there's gonna be a speaker that actually amplifies the sound of the air going through the electric motors. I don't know exactly how it works, but it's supposed to be a natural sound that's coming from the inside of the vehicle, and it's just amplified to give you a little bit of extra feeling inside and outside the vehicle. And they say that it can be just as loud, if not louder possibly, than the Hellcat exhaust. They really haven't shown off what it sounds like in the production version, so we'll have to wait and see, but it sounds kind of interesting. It's something I haven't seen any other automaker do yet in terms of electric vehicles. And then the last thing I want to point out is the fact that because they're electric powertrains, you do have a front trunk. So you have a frunk available, and every single one of them, whether you get the gas or the electric, is going to come with that big hatch-like opening in the back. So you can easily store some longer items, larger width items than you can with like the Challenger setup right now, because it's like a conventional trunk, which is pretty cool. I like that. It gives you a little bit more entrance into the cabin, and it will also make the interior feel a little bit bigger because you're not pretty much looking at the windshield right behind you. It's kind of further back. So interesting design choice, but I think it'll be beneficial to store some more items inside the vehicle. Now, next up, I want to talk about the gas version that they're going to be producing. Some people may have been surprised by this. Now, it's not going to be a V8, and I think we all kind of knew that. I mean, out in the open, they've talked about the fact that they're not going to be making V8s anymore. And so for those of you that were in the comments saying, no, they're going to bring back a V8, well, unfortunately, not at this time. Maybe at some point in the future, but at this time, they're only offering 2 internal combustion powertrains on the gas version. And that is going to be 2 different tunes of their Hurricane twin turbocharged inline 6 engine. This is an engine that they've used in a couple different vehicles. They have it in the Grand Wagoneer. I think they're rolling it out in the 2025 Ram 1500. And so we're going to see more of these engines coming out, but the Charger Sixpack is what they're calling it, is going to be one of the first ones to have this engine. And it sounds pretty impressive. Now, the standard output version is going to produce 420 horsepower. So it's already going to be more powerful than the 3.6 liter Pentastar, and it's going to be more powerful than the RT. Now, there is also going to be a high output version of this exact same engine with a different tune, and that one's going to produce a whopping 550 horsepower, which is pretty much what we expected. We knew that the inline 6 twin turbocharged Hurricane engine can produce more horsepower than the Scatpack engine. We just didn't know the exact specifics, but we have it now. No information on the 0 to 60 time, although I imagine with the all-wheel drive setup that you can get on the gas version as well, they'll probably do it in the mid to high 4s, maybe even the low 4s. It's also going to be mated to an 8-speed automatic transmission. Now, I do want to briefly talk about the interior of the vehicle, which should be the same between the gas or the electric, and I really like the interior as well. Finally, we have a more modern, updated, almost futuristic, I would say, interior. You've got upwards of 16-inch all-digital instrument gauge cluster display, which is one of the largest in the industry. Usually they're maxing out about 12.3 inches for a gauge cluster, although the base version is going to be a 10.3-inch screen. And then you've got finally an updated infotainment screen. Instead of the 8.4-inch Uconnect, you're going to get a 12.3-inch screen with wireless Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto. It's going to have the Uconnect 5 system, and it's going to look really good. It's going to flow very well. You've also got some beautiful ambient lighting. I think Dodge calls it like attitude lighting or something, but looks very good on the inside. It's similar to the exterior. It's pretty true to heart to the concept, which I really like. You've also got some pretty cool looking seats. It sounds like they're going to be able to be optioned with either cloth, leather, Alcantara, and then you have a good amount of rear seat space as well, because even the 2-door version is going to have some pretty decent room back there. So it's going to be true to the current Challenger, where you could actually fit, 4 adults in this vehicle and be just okay, right? You're not going to be comfortable, but you can be okay on like a road trip, versus like a Mustang or a Camaro where the rear seats are really just for children. So that finishes off the summary of all these vehicles, but I do want to end this video talking about my overall thoughts on the vehicle. Being a pretty big Dodge aficionado, owning these cars since 2018 or so, making tons of videos, reviewing them, and just really being in love with the Scatpack and the Hellcat. What are my thoughts on the new Dodge Charger Daytona and the Dodge Charger Sixpack? Well, I think I'm in the minority here, but I'm actually really excited. I know that EVs aren't for everybody, right? And I get that. I get that there's a lot of resistance for it, and I am totally against forcing people to buy EVs like what they're planning on doing in California by 2035. That's not my MO. I really like the option to have both. And Dodge today released exactly what I wanted. You have the option of having either an internal combustion engine or an EV, and you still get that beautiful exterior, that muscle car feel, whatever floats your boat, right? The one downside here is they're not introducing a V8 option, at least not at this time. Now, I get that a inline 6 turbocharged engine is not a one-for-one replacement for a V8 engine. And I know that that's why a lot of people are upset. I mean, just take a look at the comments of this big reveal video on YouTube for Dodge. People are not happy about it, and I totally get it, right? You're getting rid of the V8 and you're replacing it with an inline 6. But I think people are sometimes not looking at the numbers here. If you take a look at this Hurricane inline 6 in the high output version producing 550 horsepower, that's more powerful than any of the outgoing naturally aspirated V8s that Dodge had in its lineup. That doesn't include the Hellcat, of course, because that is supercharged, but the Scatpack in its most powerful form was 485 ponies. And this is more powerful than that. It also comes with all-wheel drive. And V8s, although amazing in their sound, are not the most efficient engines. And the industry overall has been moving more towards having smaller displacements, turbocharged engines that are still very fun to drive, but are a little bit more efficient. Now, it would be great to have a V8 engine, but the fact that we have any type of internal combustion engine is already a good thing. That's not something that about 2 years ago we really thought was possible. We thought that Dodge was getting rid of internal combustion engines entirely by 2024, but here we are with some good news that they're still keeping it, and it's a very good option. So I am optimistic about that fact. So I think it went as well as it could have gone. We have a large variety of different vehicles we can buy, everything from 2-door to 4-door to gas to electric, and I think Dodge knocked it out of the park with the way it looks from the outside and the inside. It's instantly recognizable. It looks like a retro muscle car, but it still has those modern touches, very similar to what I liked about the Dodge Challenger that I'm sitting in today. And yes, it's no longer a V8, but they delivered on pretty much everything else. Personally, I would purchase one of these Dodge Charger Daytonas if they were at a reasonable price. And that's the big question here is, what is the pricing for these vehicles? Now, the 2-door version of the Daytona is gonna start production, I believe, in the summertime and start hitting dealer lots sometime late summer, fall, later this year. The internal combustion version and the 4-door version of the Charger is going to be starting production the beginning of next year, Q1 of 2025. And so once we get closer to those dates, we'll have a better idea on what the pricing is. But if I were to make my best guess, I would say that the standard output version of the Hurricane internal combustion engine is going to be the entry-level trim, then perhaps the RT of the EV, then perhaps the high output version of the Hurricane engine, and then finally the Scatpack is going to be the most expensive out of the current lineup. I imagine pricing is probably going to start in the high 40s for the standard output engine, and then I could see the EV Scatpack going for over $60,000. So pretty much touching where the prior generation Hellcat started, around 60, 65 grand. So time will tell, we'll see what the pricing looks like, but I could see myself driving this next generation Dodge Charger Daytona EV in the Scatpack trim level. I really like the way it looks, and the performance figures sound very appealing, and the fact that it's all-wheel drive means I could drive it year-round. So all positives in my book, but I'm curious to hear everybody else's thoughts. You know, after you've had your initial knee-jerk reaction to the vehicle, you know, take a day or two and think about it. Do you really like this vehicle? Could you see yourself buying it? You know, perhaps replacing your current outgoing RT or Scatpack with this all-wheel drive version. Maybe you look at the Hurricane inline 6 because it has some really good performance figures. You could probably buy a bunch of different tunes from Direct Connection, which they've already talked about, to get even more power figures. So there's some good advantages there for this next generation. And I'm really excited that they're announcing something that's different and new, and not just rebadging something they produced 15 years ago and selling it at insanely high markups. It's finally something different. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. If you guys enjoyed today's video, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for all of the weekly videos. Everything from car reviews to back and forth chatter like I am doing today. Also check me out on all the social media at Schwazy_. Until next time, everybody, I hope you stay Schwazy, stay healthy, have a wonderful day.